Alright, so what we're going to be making today is a nature imprint structure. So I'm just taking something that I can find in everyday life outside that's just naturally grown or just found outside. So that could be anything from leaves, which is what I'm going to use in this example. I could use a seashell. So here I've got a scallop shell. And I've just pressed that into a piece of clay, let it go bone dry. They work better if they're bisque fired, but bone dry works as well. Just don't be too rough on it because greenware, bone dry is very brittle, very soft. Okay. You could use tree bark. This is coral reef. Okay. Anything found in nature. Let your imagination wander. Maybe go for a walk outside. Find something that you can use to inlay, and I'll show you what inlaying is. So I'm just literally following my guide from the comps here, okay? So first thing is to find something outside, and then the next thing is to roll out our slab. You can either slap out the slab to about 1/4 inch thick. If you need to, use your ruler just to measure the thickness. Okay, you'd measure your thickness. Or you could use paint sticks from Home Depot. They're exactly 1/4 inch thick, and use a rolling pin, which is what I've used here, okay? Keep in mind, when you roll out a slab, if I'm rolling it this way, it's only gonna get longer. If I need it to go wider this way, I'll need to turn it this way and then roll it out. Obviously, my rolling pin won't meet that. It won't be on the stick, so I wouldn't really be able to thin this out or lengthen it that way, but I don't need it that way. But just keep that in mind, just food for thought, okay? So the next step says to press or inlay your item from nature into your slab, okay? And I want it to be blatantly obvious what your item is. So if you press tree bark in there and you can't really carve it out the way you want to, you just gotta make it look more obvious. So in this case, I'm gonna use my leaves. I'm gonna get rid of these stems because a piece of clay that thin is gonna probably break off, so I'm not gonna use the stems. So I'm gonna press this in to my clay, and I'm gonna start here. And with leaves in particular, it'd be a good variety, if you will, to use either different leaves from what I'm using or use a variety of leaves, is what I was trying to say. When I press the leaves in, I like to use as much of the clay as I can. And I want to get a bunch of these. I'm going to end up with at least 10 of them or so for my project, and that's one of the requirements. It must be at least 10 pieces. So I start with the front of the leaf up here and roll back, because sometimes they end up wrinkled, and I don't want that because it makes the leaf shape look really odd. So I'm going to start up here, and this is just a brayer. You can use anything. I could use my hand and press it back. I could use the rolling pin, anything, but this is just an ink brayer. So I'm going to press and just make sure that it's flattened out completely. It does take a little bit of pressure. And then I'm going to go sideways as well, just make sure all those little veins from the leaf are pressed into that clay. Lovely squeaking sound, sorry. Again, breaking off the stems. I'll set one more in there, and I get it as close as I can to the other one, but I don't want it to be too close, because then when I try to carve this out later, it'll end up impeding or getting in the way of the other one. So I'm going to scoot it over just a little bit. And again, I start from the front of the leaf and work my way back, so that way it doesn't wrinkle. So I'm going to press just a little bit at the top, and then I kind of move these down and press the rest. And I don't worry about the leaves being perfect. Like this one doesn't have a tip up here. It kind of did, but I ripped it off. I can carve around that and make that shape. So I'm going to do just a couple more, and then we'll fast forward a little bit. So again, the front of the leaf, work my way back. Sometimes if the leaves have like a little maple sort of thing or like an oak leaf, I have to do the front, and then I'll hold one side and roll it, and hold the other side and roll that. So I'm going to do this one up here. I'm going to flip this around just so you can see. And again, I'm going to reverse it this time. I'm going to start up here at the top. So you can see how it starts to wrinkle right there. I'm going to pull that out and press it in. Okay, and again, go sideways as well. Just want to make sure all those little veins in that leaf are in there. I've got a few more leaves, but I'm gonna kind of fast forward here and I'll do this later. Okay, I'm gonna take my needle tool and I'm gonna carve around this. The bottom is fairly straight, so I don't worry about like the little patterns here, but I wanna dig in. I'm gonna go around, I'm all the way to the table or the wood, whatever you're working on. And right here, it starts to get jagged. So I'm gonna just wiggle my needle tool, staying to the table. I keep it tilted because it cuts better. It doesn't get so many crusties. And I just wiggle to get those little textures. It's not identical to the leaf. Okay, and I'm gonna start on this one. Again, smooth at the bottom. And then I start my little pattern. And I just follow the shape of the leaf. Okay, so I'll do one more here, and then start my little zigzag pattern. Start at the top, zigzag. So it messed up just a little bit. I go back and do it again. Okay, then I make a small slit in the clay. Small slit here as well on each leaf. So I can pull that out. Okay, one leaf, two leaves. Okay, and I'll finish the rest of this slab later on when I'm not on video. Okay, and I'll save all my extra scraps to recycle them. So you can look at this and see that it's too thick. It's not very leaf-like right now. I could just pinch this down if I wanted to. I'm gonna use my little roller on the side just to get more done quickly. I'm gonna thin out that outside. Now I don't wanna thin out all of it because I want my structure to be strong. And so the thicker the clay, obviously it's a little stronger, but it'll also be heavier. But it's pretty thin, it's a 1/4 inch thick right now. So I'm just rolling those edges a little thinner to make it appear more leaf-like and also appear thinner, even though in here it's still pretty thick. So I'll do one more. Then I'll look at it. If it ever sticks to the table too, you can use a credit card or a smooth rib, get underneath, scoop it up. Okay, so I'm gonna look at it, it's still a little thick, so I'm just gonna pinch those down just a little bit. I'm gonna give a little sass or a little attitude to this leaf, give it a little curve. Okay, so there's one. There's two. Okay, so you're gonna need at least 10 of these to meet the requirements. I've made quite a few already in advance. I would wait for these probably about 30 minutes or so, just to let them stiffen up a little bit so that they're not so floppy. And also you can get the leaf off of there. So you would take your needle tool and just I start at the bottom of the stem. That just is what works best for me. Okay, so I pull that leaf upwards. Not really stressing about leaving a little bit of matter, but I don't want too much. So like that wouldn't really matter. Why? Because it's gonna burn off in the kiln. It'll literally just turn to ash. But I don't wanna ruin my vein pattern either. So, there we go, that one's off. So now, we have a nice little leaf pattern. Okay, you see the veins and everything in there. You can see the edges are like the leaf. Pretty much identical to this. And I can't really use these again. One, it ripped. But also, when you let them dry a little bit, they crisp up and they're just hard to press into another piece of clay. So each one of these pieces is one of a kind. Okay, each one is totally different. So again, getting the leaf out of there. Just start at the bottom. Once I get that main little stem in there, I pull this up and off. Okay, so again, that wouldn't matter. I would just move forward. So now I need to build a structure that's at least 8 inches tall, 4 inches wide, or 4 inches tall and 8 inches wide, either or. So I'm gonna start with a mold. You can use any number of things. You can use, this is just a mixing bowl, household mixing bowl. You could use Tupperware, which is what I'm gonna use. Tupperware doesn't stick to too bad, but I'm gonna use paper towels just to save face and make sure that my piece or my structure doesn't stick to it. So I'm just using a couple pieces of paper towel. You could use newspaper as well. Okay, and it doesn't hurt if you spray it a little bit with water. It kind of moves it down a little bit. I'm not gonna spray too much. Just sort of limps up the paper. Also helps it stick to your mold. Okay, so that it's not so floppy everywhere. Still sort of absorbing into that paper towel. So I'm gonna move into the ones that I've already made beforehand here. So I made quite a few. And again, a lot of them I left the leaf on there. Once I stick it in the kiln and fire it to 1800 degrees for my bisque firing, or cone 06, that'll all burn off into dust and I'll just blow it off. So now I'm gonna start building my structure. So I'm gonna lay this down and I'm gonna mold it. So it's still flexible, it's not too hard to mold to what I'm building here. If it starts to crack on you, sponge it off with a little bit of water. You just let it get a little too dry. So another leaf, I'm doing these all facing down. Okay. Kind of a little spiral here. Just coming up with this as I go. Again, molding it down so you can see this one's shooting straight out. So I'm going to bend that over my mold. So now I need something to stick this together. So I'm going to take this next leaf. This is one of my fresh ones, so I'm not ready with that one yet. And I'm going to lay it where I want the next piece, which is right here. You could score and slip these first three together, but I'm going to overlap a little bit. So I'm just going to take this, I'm going to mold over. I'm going to trace where that leaf is going to be. So I'm going to trace with my needle tool, paper clip, whatever you're using. Butter knife, anything would work. So I'm going to take that off and I'm going to score that spot. Okay, just scratching so that I can attach, scoring it. Okay, and I'm going to kind of see where that sits. So I know right here needs to be scored. You don't want to score in an area that's going to be exposed when you flip it over, which I'll show you in just a few minutes. And to be honest, these little veins from the leaf are kind of score marks as well. So I'm just seeing where it's going to sit. And then I'm going to get a little bit of slip. This is just clay and water is all it is, mostly water. This is a really thin batch of slip. Water itself will work as well. I want to score that a little more. Okay, a little bit of slip. So this is a very fall themed piece here. This one will come out to pretty much like the Tupperware, a bowl shape. Okay, and I want to press sort of firmly on this because this is what's going to hold it together in the end. Okay, and now that I'm working on it, I kind of wish I would have scored and slipped these pieces together. I don't have to because I'm going to do an overlay on each of these. That one's kind of messed up on the bottom, so I'm going to discard that one. So again, I'm doing the veins facing down. You can do it whatever way you want. It's creative license here. So with these, I would keep going, score and slip, and keep building. And you can see these 3 points are the highest. Those are gonna make my foot on this. It does not have to have a foot, but it does need to stand upright on its own. I would normally just take a board and just kind of make sure it's flat and level. I sometimes put a level on top of that board as well. And I'll show you very quickly with the bat how to flatten that. Sorry about the shakes there. So just take a bat or a piece of wood and just put it on there, slightly level it. After I scored and slipped those on. The last two pieces I'm just showing you where they are. These ones I have not scored and slipped on yet. But I would push this down and just put a level on top, make sure it's nice and level. You don't have to level it, but it does need to stand up on its own without me holding it later on. So fast forward a few minutes. Let me set this one aside and I'll keep working on that one later. Okay, so this one I did on a plaster mold. Okay, this one I think has 11 pieces on it, a minimum of 10. So after I've got it all on there, I want to let it sit about 45 minutes if it's warm outside and it's not very humid, really dry day, windy day, something like that. If it's really humid or it's really cold outside, I would let it dry somewhere upwards to about 3 hours. 3 hours is pushing it though, that's a long time. That's gotta be really cold and really dry outside, or excuse me, really cold and really wet. So now this one's dried for about an hour and a half. And I built this one, I cleaned all this up with a wet paintbrush. I got in there with a sponge, still have some cleanup to do here, which I'll do with the sponge. But I would take this and remove it as long as it's solid. If I go to pick this up and I see that it's kind of flopping on me, it's not ready yet. I need to let it dry a little bit more. It's not holding up on its own. So then I would flip this over and we've got a little nature imprint bowl. Okay, and again, those little green pieces there, I wasn't worried about them because they're gonna burn off in the kiln. At this point, I would let this dry after I have cleaned up all my edges and everything, just really detailed it, gave it some good effort and craftsmanship. And also, if it comes down to it and I see something after it's bone dry and I see an edge or something that I think can be cleaned up, or if I broke off a tip, I can always use sandpaper and just clean it up, just sand it a little bit. But be careful, because you know at greenware or bone dry, it is very fragile. So that is the nature imprint. And again, you can build it any direction you want, upwards, or bowl-like, any number of things, whatever you'd like.